Coogs House. The Big 12 tournament is here this week for the Houston Cougars. And if they're going to make us play it, what should we do about this thing?
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougars, daily podcast all about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. But you're making your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Cougars. If you're enjoying the conversation and you don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below. I'm going to be honest, do you care about the end of season conference tournament? It feels like a fairly divisive issue now that Houston's in the Big 12. It did carry a little bit more weight when you're in a smaller deal conference because there were less bids for those kinds of conferences. But either way, we're going to get into the conference tournament, all kinds of things like that on today's show. But today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We'll get more on that fun later. We got a lot of fun today. Fun. Big 12 Conference Tournament opens up the show. We'll take a large chunk. I'm going to go ahead and tell you. I also want to spend some time talking about the year that just was for Houston as the regular season wrapped up with a win over Baylor over the weekend. And got my head wrapped around some of the stuff with the women's basketball coaching search. I want to look at some of that in the last segment as well. But first, Houston is heading to Kansas City to play this conference basketball tournament in the Big 12. I mentioned I think this was a bigger deal for Houston when, honestly, they were in a smaller conference because conference would only get so many bids, and the conference tournament winner was an automatic bid. And so, if like the American Athletic Conference was like a 2-bid league or something one year, you might have had to have won the tournament to get one of those 2 bids. And there's never like a preset thing, just in all reality, right? You just kind of had to make sure that you were going to be one of the bids making the tournament. Now, Houston's in the Big 12. It's just not the same kind of problem. Either way, we learned a lot about Sampson over the course of the 11 years now, right? But ultimately, we understand that like he will coach this team to win. They will play to win every single game they're on the floor. If he's going to rest a guy, the guy's just going to not suit up. And I don't see anyone on Houston not suiting up for these games. Now, Houston does earn a double bye, which is a little bit weird here. So the way the thing works, the 16-team league is the bottom, 8 teams all play the first round. They play the second 4 teams, for lack of a better phrase, seeds 5 through 8 in the second round. And then the first 1 through 4 seeds don't have to play until the next round, right? So Houston gets a double bye, effectively being the #1 overall seed in this. And the tournament bracket is out. Houston will play the winner of kind of TCU, Colorado, and West Virginia. So TCU and Colorado will play the first round game. They will play West Virginia in the second round. Houston will play the winner of that game will play West Virginia. Houston will play the winner of West Virginia and that team in the round after. That's the double bye. Now, I was kind of going through and trying to figure out who I want to play out of this, and I want to give you some of the stats that I had as important before ultimately settling on where I think right now who I want to play against. That might change as they play these games out, right? But Houston will play one of these 3 teams Thursday, 2 o'clock local time. TCU finished 9-11 Big 12 play. Houston played them early in the year. They've been 8-9 since that game. TCU's biggest wins were BYU, Tech. They won at Baylor. Bad losses were to TCU at home and actually to Colorado in Colorado over the weekend, which makes that matchup with Colorado a little bit interesting and awkward. Their best player is Noah Reynolds, 14-8 in Big 12 play, had 19 of TCU's 45 points when Houston played TCU early in the season. They just got to go through him to get things going. If you don't remember, that game was a big Emmanuel Sharp game. Hustle plays from Lake Wilson involved. It was a very traditional Houston Cougar opening to the Big 12 slate kind of game. Wasn't their toughest game by any stretch. Houston did win that one, like I said, 65-46. For felt good about it. Colorado just beat TCU and will play them in the opening round, which is kind of weird. They beat TCU at home. This opening round is going to be in a neutral site. They did lose to TCU in Fort Worth by a much bigger margin for what it's worth. Colorado finished 12-19, 3-17 in Big 12 play. They lost 13 straight Big 12 games to open Big 12 play and went 3-4 after that. So you could argue they're hot now. I don't know. Houston beat them by just 10 in Boulder. It's hard to play in Boulder. It was ugly. TCU has been 3-5 since that game, if you're doing the calculus there. Best wins for Colorado were beating Baylor there in Boulder. They beat TCU again to end the season at home. And then Colorado beat UConn in Maui early in the season. Still one that's kind of baffling to we have a locked on UConn guy, and I give him more how did you let that happen? Anyway, they did. The worst losses for Colorado are interesting is I would argue just the fact that they lost 13 straight open Big 12 play kind of feels like you just throw a dart at a dartboard. Hey, you got to turn this thing around at one of those spots, especially when you have the home court advantage that is playing in Boulder. And they didn't seem to take advantage of it very often. They also had a win that was in double overtime versus Colorado State, but that went to double overtime also feels like a loss. Weird to find their worst loss on the schedule and all of that. These two teams played the first time. No Emmanuel Sharp in that game. He was taking his week off at that point. Juwan Roberts had 20. Jay Cryer and Terrence Arsenault both had 15. Julian Hammond is their guy. He's a 6'2 guard, shooting 37% from three. He had 22 in that one. Is averaging over 12 points per game. He kind of has to be the guy that gets everything going for them because they just got a lot of size. It's not great rebounders or great post moves, but they have a lot of size that can really bug you around him. Winner of TCU and Colorado will play West Virginia for the right to play Houston in the round after that. West Virginia has that bye, but Houston's beaten them twice. Houston beat them in Houston by 16, in West Virginia in Morgantown by 14. The Locked On West Virginia guide tells me that West Virginia got hosed on calls in those, but I don't think he's used to what getting hosed on calls looked like. We've seen that in Houston quite a bit. West Virginia finished 19-12, 10-10 in conference, perfect 500 in Big 12 play. We talked about it before. Javon Small's their best player. He did have a really quick 9 points in the first matchup between these two teams, but he finished with just 13 points in that game, and all 13 were in the first half. It just had a lot of success forcing other guys to shoot. He's not surrounded by a bunch of great shooting, 260th in the country, 3-point percentage. And Javon Small shoots the ball well, so that's kind of how the rest of the guys shoot, pulling that down. And Houston did a really good job adjusting to that. They're a tough, physical team. I don't mean to say that. Again, they went 10-10 in Big 12 play. It's something to sneeze at. But I do think that Houston would win not a rubber match because they won both of them, but would win the third game matchup here as well. Best wins for West Virginia were at Fog Allen. Iowa State at home. And then they beat Arizona in what was technically a non-conference neutral Thanksgiving MTE type of game. They also beat Gonzaga early in the season. The worst loss, which was a good win at the time, worst losses for West Virginia were Arizona State in Morgantown, Pitt early in the season. Pitt ended up being 9th in the bad ACC this year. And so options there are first of all, I should point out, I would pick Houston by, in any of these games, especially have a couple days rest when they haven't had the rest. I think that this is set up for Houston to get, they're the number one seed. They should get a favorable opening matchup. I'm going to go a little bit of left field here, though. And at this moment, before TCU and Colorado have played their rubber match, I'm thinking the best thing for Houston would be to see them play TCU. Now, I know it's weird to say that, I would argue the best coach of the three schools is Jamie Dixon at TCU. There's no knock on the other guy. DeVries is going to turn West Virginia around, I'm sure, but he just hasn't done it yet. And I think that highly of Jamie Dixon. But I feel like that's the simplest matchup for Houston. Stop Noah Reynolds, stop them. The rest of the guys have trouble scoring. You also won that game by the largest margin of any of these, so you feel pretty comfortable about that matchup. They'd be on their third game in 3 days when you got them. I guess they and Colorado both theoretically would be, but that should work in your favor as well. I also I don't know. I look at them and the way that they play, and I feel like when it's not Noah Reynolds, they're kind of looking around for who could it be. And we both know that while Houston has had that happen to them a couple times in the last 10 years, and it ends up being someone going off for 15 or Jordan Poole pulling up from 45 feet or whatever, I also think that ultimately Houston would feel good about like, hey, we're going to win those matchups too, and we're going to let Milos cover Reynolds, and if he gets 20, that's fine, like in the first matchup, but your whole team's only going to get 40. So you're right. Like, I think that's going to be where that comes in. I will say Colorado in a neutral floor with Emmanuel is probably also in Houston's favor. I will say Houston seems to have figured out West Virginia as well. I'm not worried about any of them. I may change my mind after watching TCU and Colorado play. I'm debating going live after that one, just kind of talk about what Houston's opponents could be. Also about doing that after the winner of that playing West Virginia. So tell me in the comments down below if you think, or find me on social media, Paints512, if you think that'd be a fun exercise as well for getting into March Madness. Either way, I don't want to count chickens before they hatch. March is a weird time of year in college basketball where crazy things happen, but I feel pretty good about those matchups. I want to get to looking at the year that was for Houston and the Big 12 in just a second. But first, today's show is brought to you by Supply House. Now, get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts, a lot of parts, 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you can find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. You need help with an order, Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And trade pros for extra edge, kind of help you out throughout the process. Free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks, dedicated phone lines, free shipping, discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage of this. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order at supplyhouse.com. And today's show is also brought to you by Wayfair. Your home's got to reflect your style. Style of sneakers behind me. I may be selling some of these. We'll see. It's easier than ever to make that happen. Now, I will say we just bought a house this past fall, my wife and I, for our little guy. And whether you're looking to make a simple refresh, new place, big home project, whatever, Wayfair has everything you need all in that single location for you to find all those things. Wayfair's huge selection makes it easy to find the perfect piece no matter your space or budget, from cozy furniture to stylish decor and kitchen essentials, outdoor must-haves, anything you want. Wayfair has got it. Looking for a new rug in a living room? Wayfair. Looking for a new chair to complement the couch in the bigger space? Wayfair. Looking for a new chest of drawers because the other one didn't survive the move? Wayfair. Wayfair is a place to go for all those different things. As we fill out our house, I'm hoping it's the same thing for you. Head over to wayfair.com to find something to fit your style today. That's Wayfair, WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Parker Ainsworth, Locked On Coogs here. And honestly, I was thinking about reflecting on the year and talking about the end of season awards and how, Houston went 19-1 in this conference. 19 wins will likely not be broken anytime in the foreseeable future because they're going back to playing 18 conference games next year, and they don't plan on ending that anytime soon. And I kind of wanted to rant and rave about this team from that perspective, except that we're recording at night on March 9th, and they're coming off the awards on the afternoon of March 10th, and they're going to actually name the end of season awards. And so, well, I think that LJ Cryer and Jawan Roberts will make first team, or they both should. I kind of think Emmanuel Sharp and Milo Suzanne will make second or third team somewhere in there as well. I think JoJo will make all defensive team. I kind of think he might get defensive player of the year. We'll see how that goes. I don't know that LJ gets player of the year in the conference because while he was the most, impactful on winning players, certainly from a statistical standpoint, on the best team in the conference, I think they're kind of leaning into a JT Toppin kind of situation, but we'll see how that goes. I don't think because he went from Big 12 school to Big 12 school, I don't think that Miles Suzanne is eligible for a newcomer kind of guy or anything like that, or newcomer team of the year. If he were, I think he'd win it. I just don't think he is. I kind of think six man. I think Malik would be a great option. I think they're going to go to Iowa State guys on that, right? This wasn't the thing where I was going to get into a whole bunch of award predictions, but now I spend the first 90 seconds talking about it. I do think, though, that we'll reflect on that after they happen on Tuesday morning and talk about what was wrong and right with those. But I want to talk about what this season that was for Houston Cougar basketball in a way that I don't think enough people are talking about it. And I'm very, very serious when I say this, but I don't think people understand how ridiculous this is. Houston has not been trailing at the end of regulation in a college basketball game since November 9th, when they lost to Auburn by 5 points at the Toyota Center. In that game, Miles Suzanne was plus 14, right? And they lost by 5, and he fouled out with several minutes to go in the game. Dahad Pettiford goes crazy in those minutes for Auburn. They win the game, yada, yada, yada. I can't wait to see them again at the end of March Madness. But Houston lost that game on November 9th, has lost 3 games since in overtime. All 3 losses happened in overtime. None of them were on the road. 2 of them were neutral sites, 1 at Fertitta. Again, Houston has not been down at the end of regulation since November 9th. Since that happened, Houston has played 3 football games. Houston has not been down at the end of regulation since there were 3 football games left on the schedule. Houston has not been down at the end of regulation since before Mike Tyson fought Jake Paul. Houston has not been down at the end of regulation since the Chiefs lost 3 different football games, including the Super Bowl. That's right. Since that game, the Kansas City Chiefs, who play football and got to the Super Bowl, and the Houston Cougars, who play college basketball, where they play over 30 games a season, have lost the exact same amount of games. Taylor Swift, back then, speaking of the Chiefs, was still on the Eras Tour back when Houston was down at the end of regulation in a college basketball game. TikTok was banned since then, right? This is farther back than the TikTok ban of 12 hours. That was 12 hours, right? What was the world like back when Houston was down at the end of regulation on November 9th? Luka Doncic was a healthy playing for the Mavericks basketball player. That's all changed. Juan Soto was a New York Yankee. Jimmy Carter was alive. The world was a whole different place. And I understand they lost 4 games. And I understand one of those was to Auburn. I understand that even after the bad week Auburn just had, they're the number 1 team in America. They got a ton of quad 1 wins, and they'll be number 1 overall without a doubt, right? Houston was 4-3, and people acted like the world's falling apart. The sky was falling. They're never going to be the same without Jamal Shead. Their first year in the Big 12 was a total fluke because of this great player, yada, yada, yada. And man, oh man, did all of that end up looking like a bunch of crap. The dominant run over such a long period of time. Now, I can already see people typing in the comments, it's not the Big 12's best year ever, or da-da-da-da. And it's funny to see this happening, where the Big 12 is suddenly not as good as they used to be for the 2 seasons that Houston comes in. It has, couldn't have anything to do with the fact that Houston did that to the conference, right? Houston walked in the trap and took over the trap, taking the crown off of the Big 12 champs in their house in double overtime and outwilled them in a way that broke Kansas, right? Like, they come to this conference and they steal it from the snatches of everyone that thought they had Iowa State, all these different teams that thought they had claim at it. Houston's dominated this thing. And frankly, since being down at the end of regulation on November 9th, again, back when Jimmy Carter was like, oh, these crazy things when you go back at how far back that was, they've only been dominant. Now, I get the San Diego State loss was a quad 2 loss. Man, San Diego State, overtime, 3rd game in a week in Las Vegas over Thanksgiving break. Crazy, right? Like, You want to talk about bad losses that have happened in this conference? Bad losses that have happened to teams at the top of college basketball. Like, I get that there was a cluster of them at the start of the season while Houston was figuring things out. And I get that Houston has things they can continue to improve on. We saw, I'd like to get my chalkboard out, but I didn't quite get it out in time for this. Houston get better at breaking the press between the Baylor games, right? And the press break they ran at the end of in the last second half against Baylor on Saturday was pretty strong, to say the least. It's going to make other teams pause before man pressing Houston. But ultimately, I don't feel like this is just a time frame that people are adequately understanding. To beat Houston since November 9th, the first Saturday of the season, you have to play an extra 5 minutes. It's utterly crazy. It's insane. And no one's talking about the season like that. There's all kinds of other statistics that are out there about this season, and the season's not over. We've got a lot of important basketball to play. But, man, that's just crazy to me. Now, I want to talk about the season that is over and how they're going to move forward with the women's program in a second, because I'm excited about that. And, frankly, depending on what direction they go with, I might get more excited about that. But before we get too far, I did mention the Day Show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And March Madness is here. That means things are getting more hot over at FanDuel, giving you a chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet hits. That's $200 extra bucks you can use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, everything about cutting down nets, everything going on in March over at FanDuel. Now, I can go around and pick some underdogs and maybe, pick some smaller school conference kind of guys and that kind of stuff, or, get on the action as every single game happens, every single round starts to move forward. All that is super easy to do over at FanDuel. Simple app to use. Get paid instantly. No waiting around. Visit FanDuel.com. Get in on college hoops action all tournament long. Parker Ainsworth locked on Coogs here. And I wanted to talk some about the women's basketball coach situation. I held off on it last week for a couple reasons, but one, I was still gathering information about who could be a candidate and what directions they could go. And full disclosure, there are people much more plugged in on this than I am, and I'm reading and trying to DM, and I'll get some responses back and stuff like that, right? But Houston last week let go of Ron Huey, who I didn't know personally, but for everyone you ask, everyone you talk, like the reports, the way he talks about his players, was a fantastic human being that just was not having a whole lot of success as a basketball coach. And that's frankly why it sounds like he got to do this past year as his contract and kind of, got told he wasn't going to be renewed at the end of the season, so he resigned. And for what it's worth, there are a lot of places where being a great guy is okay and enough. And as Houston's moving towards a competitive program in the Big 12, like, hey, we need you to also win games, right? And that's the way the direction of the program's going, and so on. Huey, though, was he was really beloved by his players and so on, and he's out the door, and Houston's moving on. And I see a lot of people saying, got to go get this guy. They got to go get this girl. They got to go with this person to replace him or whatever. And the first place I went to was, okay, what was Houston paying Ron Huey? Women's basketball is not the revenue generator that football is or anything like that. You got to kind of see, like, what does Houston have allocated, especially when you think about, like, having to pay players out of pocket and stuff like that. Like, what are they going to put into this? Huey was making mid $300,000 range as far as what his contract was on AAV. Big 12 coaches are typically making somewhere between the middle 50% is, between 700 and 800. The last year there was one making over $1 million. And frankly, I think she just got fired if it's the one I'm thinking of at Arizona State. And so I think that what you're seeing here, you're starting to see coaches cross that line by the end of their contract. And so I think they're anticipating things getting higher, but you're really looking at in the high $100,000s range, which is still 2 or 3 times what Houston was paying Ron Huey. So you still have to increase that budget a lot and get a competitive coach. And I think it sounds like they're going to do that. I will say, though, some of the names I heard people throwing out, like, let's go get so-and-so from such and such school. It's like that person's making $2.5 million where they are. The idea that you're going to pay them enough money to get them out of that job and into your job would literally multiply what you're currently paying a coach by over 10 times, right? And that does seem a little ridiculous. I don't know, we're quite to the point where we're jumping to that. Now, women's basketball is becoming more profitable. Frankly, I'm going to tell you, as a fan of basketball, when it's good, it's really good. Women's college basketball is a ton of fun. The national level, I think, has been exploding for a couple years now, but like UConn and Paige Beckers, Juju Watkins, I don't want to talk about UT Austin a whole lot, but like what Schaefer's done there has been pretty impressive. There's all kinds of fun programs to follow. TCU just did this, got a new coach, got a few transfers in. They won the Big 12 right away, right? Like Haley Van Lith's an impactful player, obviously, but that's a very replicable formula because you can do the same thing at Houston, right? And so I'm interested in following this along. I dig a few people, got some names, looked at some of their contracts, kind of pulled some stuff up. I will say that I'm hearing different things from different people as far as like, will this be a high-end power 4 caliber, high-end assistant, second in command kind of thing? Will this be a G5 person with an impressive resume that moves up or whatever? The G5 person I like so far is Karen Aston. I'm still flipping through, trying to read more resume kind of information about different people, but Aston is at UTSA. She was at Texas early in her career, North Texas, on staff in Baylor in the 90s and 2000s. UTSA is at the top of the American Athletic Conference right now, and impressively so. And it's all turnaround based on Karen Aston. Play a fun brand of basketball, too, for its worth. That's your jam. They'll be in the tournament, so make sure you flip over and watch that one if you're trying to get an eye. Jason Burton has kind of had a quick turnaround at North Texas. Same kind of thing, right? The same G5 success that will translate. The thing I like about both Aston and Burton is they're in Texas already. As far as recruiting grounds go, you're going to recruit this thing from the ground up and rebuild it. They know the pipelines in the state of Texas and kind of have an idea what the talent will look like and where to go to get it. Obviously, it needs to be a step up at the Big 12 level, but they'll have every facility resource. I mean, everything the men's team gets from a facilities perspective, the women's team has as well. That works incredibly to their advantage. It's a program that has all of those kind of structural things built in already, and we'll have a true rebuild set up in terms of, like, we understand this starting from ground level. They won 5 games this year. Got to start from somewhere, right? People are talking about Kelsey Musick from Oral Roberts. She was a Division II national champion coach at Southwest Oklahoma State. I think I said that acronym correctly. Only been in Oral Roberts a couple of years. I think she'd be good as well. I think I like the basketball UTSA is playing more, if I'm being frank about what I asked. And so that's, I think she'd be a great coach. I'm interested, if they're not going to go with one of these G5 people, though. Everyone's talking about the Texas program is kind of shot up to number 1 team in the country, or at least they were for a chunk of the year or whatever. And their associate head coach, Elena Lovato, was a noted recruiter in like the greater Houston region, and does a lot of this half of Texas for the UT women's team. She was the 2023 Division I women's basketball coach, assistant coach of the year. She got promoted to associate head coach there at Texas. And for what it's worth, it sounds like she would be next in line, except that Schaefer guy's not going anywhere. And so I imagine that that's a good thing for if she were to get a call from Houston, because she would look around, okay, this is a Big 12 job to really like build something fresh, great facility. I mean, great facilities for a women's basketball program. Again, like they share all the same things that the men do. The Jordan sponsorship deal helps sell itself as well. It's a basketball town, and the comments aren't around anymore, but like we saw the town get somewhat into that thing as well. And women's college basketball exploding in a way that it was not in the late 90s, early 2000s. I think that all of that is circling around to like the talent is in Houston to take and make a program. And Lovato would be the kind of person that could come in and see that as a thing to do. Also, that she'd want to build up a program to beat UT Austin, and that would sell pretty well here. And so I think that that's a good option there. I see people talking a lot about this Molly Miller. This would be a G5 person, but Molly Miller at Grand Canyon. I know it's a little bit out of order here. Sorry. She'd be the G5 person. For what it's worth, Grand Canyon won more games against Big 12 opponents this year than Houston did, and Molly Miller was the head coach there. Now, only has one season in her extensive career with less than 20 wins, and it was 18 wins in the 2020-21 season, which is shortened by COVID, right? So got to think she'd come in and get to that 20-win number pretty quick. I don't know how to put this politely. I don't think she's looking at Houston. I think she's probably going to, if I'm being honest, get like an SEC job, right? Very, very quickly. SEC. I mean, look at the top 25 women's basketball coach salaries. Only one of them was a Big 12 school. And again, I think that's the one that just got fired. So I say that to say that I don't know that they're going to have the pocketbook to get that one. I think they might, though, to get Lovato. And then I think they definitely will for Aston or Burton. I think all these are great options. I'm intrigued by other things as well. Kelly Harper was at Tennessee and kind of got a raw deal. She was on TV the last year. I can't tell if she's trying to get back into coaching or not. But she was a all-time great coach at Missouri State, got to Tennessee and had 5 years there. And like my read on was kind of she got fired because she like wasn't Pat Summitt, right? And so like no one's Pat Summitt, right? But anyway, but I also have people tell me like, oh, big names coming. And then I'm digging and looking and seeing who those people are. So if you got information, DM, comment down below. Let's talk about it. As more unfolds, more will come on this show. We'll talk about it more as it happens. I will say, though, however, ultimately, obviously, I bet nothing major happens until we're into the tournament a little bit because the coaches they're looking at, frankly, are still working and coaching, and we don't want to do what Miami did and take a person away from their team midseason. That team's pretty messed up. Oh, I said that out loud. Locked On Coogs, primarily the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Breaking things down this week, NCAA tournament. Keyshawn Henderson and the Houston Cougars football program continue. I mean, he continues to shoot up the charts. Spring practice around the corner. All kinds of things. Locked On Coogs every day. Locked On Coogs, primarily Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Go Coogs.